The highest mount in the world, Mount Everest, has a mathematical anomaly that defies normal human logic. Statistically, the single most hazardous fixed location on the entire mountain is not the death zone. It is not the knife-edge summit ridge. It is Stage 1, the very first 2 kilometers of ice directly outside of base camp. Yet, data from over 7 decades of expeditions reveals an even darker paradox. More than half of all climbers who die above base camp don't perish on the way up. They die on the descent, frequently after successfully touching the highest point on Earth. Stage 1. From base camp to Camp 1, the Khumbu Icefall. The Himalayan database records at least 47 confirmed fatalities in the Khumbu Icefall alone, making it technically the most hazardous fixed location on the entire route. Remarkably, this bottleneck comes first. Before the extreme altitude has truly taken hold, before Camp 2, and well before the death zone, teams must navigate 2 kilometers of continuously moving glacial ice. The Khumbu Glacier shifts up to 1.2 meters every single day. A route that is stable at midnight can open into a 100-meter void by afternoon. Seracs. Unstable towers of ice reaching the height of a 12-story building, hang directly above the path and can collapse at any moment without any warning. Crevasses plunge beyond 100 meters in depth, most of them hidden beneath thin snow bridges that look identical to solid ground. Climbers cross these chasms on aluminum ladders lashed together end to end, balancing on steel crampons above a drop that would swallow a human body without a trace. On the 18th of April, 2014, this structural volatility triggered an avalanche that swept through the icefall at 6:30 in the morning, killing 16 Sherpa guides in a single event. It remains the deadliest single morning in Everest's recorded history. What makes the icefall uniquely brutal in this ranking is not just the baseline risk, but the total exposure time. A standard expedition client crosses it a minimum of 4 times during acclimatization rotations. However, the Sherpas who fix ropes and ferry supplies to the upper camps make that crossing up to 20 times or more in a single season. This structural danger cannot be overcome by skill. It can only be minimized by timing. Stage 2. From Camp 1 to Camp 2, the Western Khum. The Himalayan database tracks a distinct shift in hazard profiles as teams enter the Western Khum, with documented fatalities here driven primarily by deep crevasse falls, massive avalanches spilling off the enclosing valley walls, or acute medical emergencies triggered as altitude takes hold. But the more significant challenge this basin presents is entirely physiological. The valley is enclosed on 3 sides by the towering rock faces of Everest, Lhotse, and Nuptse, creating a giant natural funnel that traps solar radiation and transforms the snow-covered floor into a highly reflective heat basin. Temperatures here can change from minus 20 degrees Celsius before dawn to above 30 degrees by midday, a crushing 50-degree shift within a matter of hours. Operating under extreme thermal stress while fighting thin air triggers immediate cognitive decline. Crucially, these physiological consequences do not manifest immediately. They are delayed. The physical damage is realized hours later, much higher on the mountain, where the atmospheric pressure drops and errors become impossible to reverse. Teams that push through the Khum too aggressively arrive at Camp 2 completely drained of core stamina. The valley floor looks like a reprieve, but it acts as a delayed physiological trial, one whose true results are only realized above 8,000 meters. Camp 2 waits at the far end at 6,400 meters, marking the absolute final flat ground on the entire route. Stage 3. From Camp 2 to Camp 3, the Lhotse Face. The structural data reveals that the Lhotse Face presents an entirely different style of risk, making it a highly deceptive statistical trap. This stage consists of a massive 1,100-meter wall of hard, blue glacial ice pitched at an angle between 40 and 50 degrees. It offers 0 flat ground, no natural rest points, and no alternative lines of ascent. It begins immediately above Camp 2. Climbers ascend this sheer wall using steel crampons and ice axes, physically clipped into a single line of fixed ropes anchored directly into the ice. Camp 3 is established midway up the wall at 7,162 meters. It consists of narrow tent platforms manually hacked into the ice slope, with tents secured entirely by ice screws, leaving teams positioned directly above an unbroken drop to the valley floor.
The data proves that fatalities here most commonly result from sudden slips, crampon placements failing, or a fixed rope anchor pulling out under load. However, the real driver behind these accidents is a severe lack of oxygen. At 7,000 meters, the human body operates at roughly 60% of its sea level oxygen capacity. Severe hypoxia narrows the margin for error to zero. This steep ice wall requires flawless technical focus from a brain already functioning at a fraction of its normal speed, a reality that exponentially magnifies the consequences of any minor misstep. Stage 4. From Camp 3 to Camp 4, the threshold. Between Camp 3 and Camp 4, the route crosses the yellow band, a prominent layer of eroded limestone, followed by the Geneva Spur, a steep black rock buttress. Historical expedition records track very few direct fatalities on these specific rock formations, meaning this section does not rank among the high fatality zones in raw numbers. However, this stretch is where the most consequential tactical decisions of the entire expedition are made. Pace, oxygen flow rate, and timing, every calculation here directly determines a climber's remaining physical reserves for the death zone above. Errors in judgment made on this stage do not reveal themselves immediately. They surface hours later on the summit ridge, when the physical reserves spent too freely below have already run out, while the summit is still ahead. This is the final section of the route where a climber can meaningfully rest. Once crossing the 8,000 meter mark above the Geneva Spur, the enters rapid, irreversible depletion. There is zero biological replenishment above this line. Stage 5. From Camp 4 to Summit, the death zone. Historical expedition records isolate approximately 1/3 of all deaths in Everest history to this final stretch alone, meaning the thin ridgeline above 8,000 meters accounts for nearly 1/3 of all deaths in Everest's history. At this extreme elevation, the atmosphere holds just 1/3 of the oxygen available at sea level. Human biology cannot acclimatize to this environment. It simply deteriorates on a fixed, hyper-accelerated clock. Cells die, cognitive processing fractures, and motor coordination systematically breaks down. In temperatures between -30 and -40 degrees Celsius, exposed skin freezes in under 2 minutes. Jet stream winds sweeping across the South Col regularly exceed 80 kilometers per hour, with peak gusts at the summit clocked at 280 kilometers per hour, surpassing the velocity of a Category 5 hurricane. Crucially, the statistical data published in PLOS One found that approximately 56% of all Everest fatalities above base camp occur during the descent, rather than the ascent. This means that climbers who successfully crossed the icefalls, the faces, and the rock bands frequently encounter a catastrophic systems collapse on the return route. On the 10th of May 1996, 8 climbers lost their lives when a severe storm system moved across the South Col during their descent. Rob Hall, one of the most experienced expedition leaders on the mountain that season, became stranded near the Hillary Step while assisting a client who had lost consciousness on the descent. He spoke to his wife by satellite phone from above 8,700 meters during the blizzard, with severe winds across the ridge making rescue operations logistically impossible. He did not survive the night. Several other climbers that night collapsed within meters of their tents at Camp 4. They possessed the correct equipment, extensive experience, and had successfully reached the summit. A bleak statistical baseline proving that above 8,000 meters, environmental volatility can instantly overwhelm human preparation.